Hey, welcome to Keep On Pushing TV. I am your host, Devon Harris. And yes, you know what we do here. We share ideas that are going to inspire you, insights that are going to challenge you and encourage you to keep on pushing and live your best life. Are you interested in that? Well, if you are, you know you're in the right place. So welcome to Keep On Pushing TV. My guest today is an amazing individual, man. I think you're going to really enjoy this. At the age of 14, he won the junior ski championships in India, his native India. A year later, he was invited to participate in a luge camp at his school. And 1 year later, at 16 years old, he became the youngest person to ever qualify to compete in luge at the Olympic Games. Since then, he has grown to become known as India's fastest man on ice. He has set the Asian speed record. In fact, he's an Asian champion. He has won between 2005 and 2016 10 medals in the Asian Cup and Asian Championships. And yes, of course, he's an Olympic athlete, six-time Olympic athlete. Have you heard right? He's a six-time Olympian, man. And, since his days on the slope, he has become a husband, a father. He is a founder and president of the Indian Olympic Association. I am so excited to be able to welcome India's fastest man on ice, a guy that I met many years ago, Shiva Keshevan. Shiva, welcome to Keep On Pushing.
Hi, hello everybody, and hi Devon. It's such a pleasure to be speaking to you. From the last time, you're actually an inspiration to me. From way before I started picking up the sport. So it's amazing after so many years to catch up again and look back at our journey.
Yeah, it's great, man. The last time I saw you, you were a boyish-faced teenager competing in your very first Olympic Games in Nagano. As I just mentioned, you're a six-time Olympian now, a father, a husband. How's life been treating you, Shiva?
Well, it's been great. I mean, it's been such a long journey. It's been 22 years that I've been completely focused on sports. And right now, I did my last Olympics in 2018, the Pyeongchang Games, and now I'm looking into this difficult phase of transition that all athletes have to face at some point in their career. After you've competed at the highest level, and then you have to start from scratch and reintegrate into society as we speak. But since there are so many lessons learned along the way, so many places visited, so many people we've met, it's a great opportunity to put all that into practice, in the work life as well. So it's still trying to be an Olympian.
Indeed. Yeah. So when I think of India and the Olympics, what comes to my mind first of all is field hockey, and then maybe badminton, or as they say in America, badminton, or boxing or wrestling. But luge, I mean, how did that come about?
Well, it's an interesting story. Actually, India is such a huge country. We have we have all kinds of areas, all kinds of climates, and I come from a very little known area of India, way up north, close to the region of Kashmir, and it's a place where we do have winter. We do have really high mountains. In fact, I was born on 2,500 meters of altitude. Mm-hmm. I see 3,000-meter peaks from my home, and it was always a dream for me to make this, this really secluded area and this secluded concept of winter sports into the mainstream, and which is why I've always been so passionate about representing not just my country but my roots in the Himalayas, the small village of Bashisht.
Yeah. And so you're in school, and a luge coach comes there and decided that he wanted to find athletes to do luge?
Well, yes, actually, you mentioned hockey and you mentioned a number of other sports. Hockey was one of my favorite sports as a kid. I represented my school team on that sport. And I was generally very sporty. I played all kinds of sports. My parents always pushed me for a healthy lifestyle, for an outdoor lifestyle, for an active lifestyle. And obviously I became known as a winter sports athlete after I won a few skiing races in my childhood. And since the idea of winter sports wasn't really developed in India, the moment my school received an invitation for a luge camp, the first parallel they drew is, hey, we have a guy in winter sports. This is another winter sports. Let's push him. And nobody, myself included, knew of luge as a competitive discipline. I used to slide since I was a kid, since I was probably 6 or even earlier than that. But I never imagined that I could go sleigh riding and make a career out of it. Right. So when the international federation started this luge development camp, and we had he was an ex-world champion. His name was Gunther Lemmerer. He's an Austrian, and he traveled around the world trying to recruit young athletes from countries that didn't have a tradition in the sport. And that's how we ended up in India, and that's how I got invited into this training camp with a number of junior champions from various sports. And actually, one of the first things they did to us to introduce us to the sport and to spike our interest was to show us the movie Cool Runnings. So in a way, your roots are very much connected to how I started the sport, and so I really identify.
Awesome. So you went to this camp. You impressed the coaches. Were there any other athletes who were selected to continue training?
There were. In fact, the first time after initial luge camp, this was I think in 1996. There was myself and another young athlete from Delhi. We both performed well in this camp, and we won the competition which they held at the end of this camp. And this was a roller luge competition. So they had modified the luge sleds, taken off the blades, and put wheels under them. And they would send us down the highways. And there were cones that were acting as the checkpoints that we had to take. And this time down would win. And with my skiing background, I think I had an extra gear with respect to many of the other competitors. And myself and this other friend of mine from Delhi, Himanshu, who were selected to travel to Austria and to go to Europe for the first time as an unaccompanied minor, and see the world. Incredible opportunity for us. And from that point on, I think my background with skiing, with winter sports, being born in a mountain and snow environment, I managed to excel more than all of the other athletes who came up, along the, after and all the following years. Because I already had that experience on how to behave on ice, and it's not so easy. Even walking is difficult on ice. If you don't have the experience. I discovered that
early in my bobsledding career as well. You're right. Yeah.
So yeah, I think I had that advantage, and I always wanted to prove myself in something unique, something that was close to my heart, and being able to do that in winter sports, and particularly in luge, there's so many things that appeal to me about this sport. So I was all in from the moment I started.
What was it? So in addition to the fact that you were a skier and you were kind of accustomed to operating in that kind of environment with the twists and turns and so on, what else about luge that you fell in love with?
As a kid, it is more of a superficial level, because it was about the excitement, it was about the adrenaline. Those are the first few things, and as somebody who's was always very much into adventure, something so challenging as luge, it immediately appealed to me, and then And then, of course, the emotion of being on the track or just seeing a sled go down the track for the first time, even though it's it's a small little non-technological piece of equipment, but you hear it coming down, the jet is coming at you, and then before you see it, it's already gone. That really got my heart pumping, and I remember the first time, and many following times after that, in the first few years when I was getting into the track, just dealing with confronting my fears, trying to overcome all the mental aspects of it. It was so challenging. And then the more I got to know about the sport, and the more it became a pursuit of excellence and perfection. I think many speed sports can find this in common. It seems almost like time is slowing down. People who are looking at you from the outside, they can't fathom how you can do so many movements in what looks like the blink of an eye.
Yes.
Whereas when you're experiencing it, it seems a lot longer than that, and it's almost like a meditative process. And so you look deeper and deeper into yourself, and try to find the small things that can give you an edge. And it's all about self-improvement at the end of the day, I feel.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of interesting things. And so you're right. When you're in a sled or on a sled, time, it doesn't stop, but it really slows down. And it's hard when I describe bobsledding to someone for them to fathom me telling them that I'm sitting in a sled saying to myself, wait. And they're trying to figure out where does all that time come from to wait. But you mentioned fears, controlling your fears. What would you say is your, certainly as it relates to your sport, luge, is your biggest fear? And how do you deal with it? How do you conquer it?
Well, initially it was very simple. It's the fear of bringing harm to yourself. Because at such extreme circumstances, you have the speed, you have the G-force, you have you have the medium, which is ice, that is so slippery, so much can go wrong. That you have to have the confidence in yourself that you are able to overcome that, and that was a big challenge. And even even once I got to an international level of the sport, when you're going from the men's start from the top of the track, you're crossing 140 kilometers an hour. You still have some points in the track where you can have difficulties, and the more errors you make in one particular point, suddenly that becomes a wall that you have to overcome. And how do you do that when you know that you have to go down the next run and face that wall again, and face hurt, feeling pain, and how do you detach yourself from that and find the best in yourself, and then as you say, you keep on pushing until you overcome that, and then you start believing in yourself.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing you saying is that although you're afraid, you're still going on the track. And a lot of people, when they think that people who are successful are fearless, and it's quite the opposite. Courage is still being scared to death, still knowing that you have to face that wall, as you just mentioned, but doing it anyway, making yourself doing it, because the more you face the fear, the greater your ability to overcome that fear and then succeed, excel, becomes. So 6 Olympic Games, man, that is commendable. Longevity, 6 Olympic Games in a row. It kind of reminds me of Anne Abernathy, Grandma Luge from the U.S. Virgin Islands, right? But the thing that, in a way, surprises me, Shiva, is I see luge as a little bit more dangerous than bobsledding, because we have a sled to cover us. You guys are exposed to the elements, right? You're more susceptible to injuries. But yet, here it is that I have you, and there are others who have done 5 or less, Ruben Gonzalez. What do you think accounts for that longevity in your sport of luge? I cannot, off the top of my head, think of any bobsledders who have done 6 Olympic Games.
Well, there's a lot of things. The first thing, I think luge has a really long learning curve. In many sports, you can just start, you can just wear your shoes, or get on the field and perform, and experience it. Whereas in luge, it takes sometimes years just to be able to go off and start from the top start of the track that we call the men's start. And for me, when I started the sport, we didn't really have much of a junior circuit. And from the time I was 15 years old, I was competing with the men. And so it takes so much time to reach that point. And since it is a technical sport, and you mentioned some of the differences between luge and bobsled, there are so many nuances that you don't really understand, and it takes a long time to understand how to go fast without an engine. Apart from the physical challenges, apart from the start, which is the only time that we are really putting our force into it, our energy into it. The rest is technical, is to figure out how can I be 5 centimeters to the left, how can I capture this G-force and get the forward momentum out of it, understanding how just by lifting your head up a little bit, or rather laying your head back a little bit more, you can be more aerodynamic and get those hundreds or thousands of a second.
Yeah.
And that is what takes so long time in luge. I think that is one very important aspect of it. And then of course there's the technology component that it comes after years. You can start to concentrate on the technology after you've worked on yourself.
Yeah.
And also I think since it is an adventure-driven sport, a lot of people take it up for the passion, and once you're hooked, once you're used to those kind of emotions, it's difficult to let go, and you're always chasing that marginal improvement. This run I was a few hundredths better than last run, and that's such a great accomplishment, and then you go to the next small step. So it just kind of sucks you in, and ultimately, apart from all the aspects of the sport, for me, it became more of becoming part of a greater whole, finding a family, which is my competitors, and then the entire environment that you find on circuit. And then, of course, once I reached the Olympic Games, that family got extended, to people from all walks of life, all countries, all sports. And being part of that greater whole is something that is very hard to let go.
Yeah, that is true. You mentioned just progressing from just going down the track to finding ways to become more aerodynamic, finding that hundredth of a second, and it is so true. And I think in all of our experiences, you go from just surviving, getting down the track to having a certain amount of control, to the point where you're like, I need to figure a way to go faster in this corner. And I think it's instructive to all of us in life as well. They talk about the different levels of competencies, and in everything that you do, everything that all of us do, we have to understand that you're going to start with this, at this point where you really know nothing. And then you build and you build until you become very competent, because everything, I think, or most of the things that we need to succeed in life is skill based. So Shiva, let's go back. It's to 1998. You mentioned actually earlier that you had a desire to kind of bring your little part of India on the map as a kind of a winter destination. So it's 1998, you made the Olympics. Well, before that, before luge, were you ever thinking about competing in the Olympic Games?
Well, I was always dreaming, I'm a dreamer that way, you want to accomplish things in life, and everything that I would set my mind to, every sport that I would compete in, I wanted to be the best at it. And but not having access to the kind of facilities that you see other athletes around the world have when you watch these big international competitions on TV, it seemed so unrealistic to one day be able to compete on that stage. because the place where I grew up, my little village, we don't have a gym, we don't have a single stadium. There's no real professional sport environment. And but still, even in that environment, passion can allow you to create the best for yourself. Some things that we had access to, for example, is high altitude. So no matter what training you're doing, whether it's outdoor training, just free weight training, you have that. It affects you that much more. So making use of your strengths, and not giving up just when you see that, all right, somebody else has access to so much more facilities, or such a faster sled, or there are so many things that can really bring you down. But everybody, I think, has his own way, and just by following somebody else, it's more difficult to reach your goal, rather than finding your own way, something that suits you, your personality, your abilities. And then is the difficult part, because you don't really have anybody to follow. Of course, you have so many idols that you can get inspiration from, but ultimately, you have to cut your own path, and that is what I think is the most important thing.
Indeed. That's wise words, Shiva, because you spoke about unrealistic dreams and limitations, lack of resources, right? Drawing inspiration from others, but at the same time, creating your own path. And it's you're absolutely true in all walks of life, and it doesn't matter whether you're in Indiana or India. It's worthwhile pursuing those unrealistic dreams, because here it is that you are a teenage boy in a remote part of India, pursuing these unrealistic dreams and having no idea how those dreams could ever come to fruition, because, as I said, there are no gyms, there are no trainers, no access to any resources. But you're sitting in front of us as a 6-time Olympian, because you drew inspiration from others, and I appreciate you, talking about our story being one of those inspirations. But in the end, you cut your own path. So you qualify for Nagano. Then did the magnitude of that accomplishment hit you? Right then, what was it like? What was going through your mind about this chance to represent your country, being that guy, the only person actually in the Olympics in Nagano for your country back then?
Well, it was an amazing moment. It was very overwhelming for me as a 16-year-old to reach the Olympic Village, to reach Japan. My family was far away, all my friends. In fact, I had no teammates. I was the only person representing India in Nagano. And of course, I realized how big this event is. But when I set foot in the opening ceremony stadium for the first time, and when I lined up for that march past for the first time, that's when the magnitude of it actually hit me. And I was completely awestruck, and I really didn't know how to react, and I was shy in a way, to be under such scrutiny and under the focus of the world, and you realize that you're stepping into such a big stage. And if I can tell you, that is the moment that I met you for the first time.
Yes.
And you came up to me, and we had a conversation, and you. Even though we had never met before, I knew some of your background story, and we connected. And that's when I felt part of something bigger, and I wasn't alone out there. And then of course, once they hand you your country's flag, then you feel that I have the weight of so many millions of people behind me, and that's what gives you courage. And then you realize that you're insignificant really, but what you're carrying with you is then what you can draw this courage from.
Yes, indeed. So what does this experience and everything that you're describing to us now, what does it say about these unusual opportunities that life throws at us, that maybe starts because we're harboring these unrealistic dreams in our hearts and in our minds, and then life throws these unusual opportunities, and the willingness and the open-mindedness that that we need to have to step through the door and go explore those opportunities?
Well, I think that's a very good question, and it's something that everybody is, is confronted with in many phases of their lives. In India, for example, when I was growing up, when you're going to school, your parents would tell you you have to be a doctor or you have to be an engineer, and that is your goal. And they would try to, set that path in front of you, and you have to follow a set path, right, to success. But what happens when everybody follows this? You have a country which is full of engineers, or full of doctors, and there's so much competition, and there's so many things that are left, without being addressed. I think each of us is unique. We all have our unique stories. We all have our unique aspirations. And for me, thanks to my family as well, they always push me to be my own person, to think for myself, and to find what fulfills me. And I found that calling in luge, even though I didn't know it earlier on. It was a set of opportunities that came up to me. And at that moment, when you're faced with that opportunity, you have to have the courage to say, all right, I accept this challenge, and I'm going to take this challenge, and I'm going to prove to myself what I can do. And that is what then will set you on a unique path and open up more and more and more opportunities in front of you.
Indeed. May we all, strive to find our unique path, Shiva. So I know you alluded to this, just maybe in your last answer before this, but I wanted to kind of revisit it. So I describe marching in the opening ceremonies as kind of the first instance where you're really realizing and experiencing this Olympic dream. You march into a stadium and there are, 50, 60,000 people cheering, more cameras than you can count, and you're holding, and certainly in your case, your nation's flag. What did that moment mean to you, if you can speak to that a little bit more?
Representing my country, it was the biggest honor of my life. Carrying the flag, and due to the circumstances, the only one representing India over there. So I immediately knew that it is something which is so much bigger than myself. And I think it brought out a lot in me. It brought out a lot of maturity in that 16-year-old boy, to understand that, every moment I'm here, I'm representing my country, and I have to do that with honor. I have to show the best side of myself, of my country. And you never know the bonds that you create, the example that you set, the repercussions that you can have, especially when you're on that kind of stage. And the country, of course, and then the Olympic movement, just understanding the ideals and the responsibilities and the Olympic oath at the opening ceremony. And really the moment that Olympic flame comes on, that symbolizes the fire that we have burning within us. I cried the first the first time I saw the Olympic flame come on at the opening ceremony, and I'm sure I can relate to that.
Yeah, you're right. It's a really powerful symbol for me. One of my favorite moments of the Olympics is when that flame is lit, and one of my saddest moments is the extinguishing of that flame. I can still hear the horrible sound, the horrible swoosh, and what I describe as utopia is over. But of course we get to to meet again 4 years later. So in a way, the flame burns eternal inside of us. So, you started in your sport, a short time before the Olympic Games. And you mentioned earlier that because there were no junior programs going on, you were already competing against men. Did you compete before Nagano? The Olympic race is always the biggest race for all of us. Before that race, did you compete in any World Cup race or World Championship the year before?
I did the pre-Olympic season, and I did the year before that, where I was already on circuit. The first year, I managed to qualify for my first World Cup. From there, from the moment I qualified for my first World Cup, that was the first realization I had that I was good enough to step onto the world stage. And that was the first time that my coach, asked me the question, and told me that he thinks I'm good enough to do this. Do I have it in me to go and do the qualification, which means competing in 5 World Cups, making the top 40, and getting the minimum number of points. And so that was my. Still, I couldn't look at the Olympics because the Olympics was too big to fathom for me at that moment.
Right.
But it was a question of, I'm competing with all these people that I idolized. I think they're gods of the sport, and here I am, sharing the same dressing room with them. And when I qualified, I said, hey, wait a minute, I'm not so far behind. It's just 3.5, 4 seconds behind these guys, and I can catch them. And every race, I had only 5 opportunities. I didn't have any margin for error. If I would have crashed out or not qualified for a single one of those 5 races, it would have meant that I'm not going to the Olympics. And I was lucky, things worked out. But also I was not looking at failure because I had nothing to lose. I had everything to gain, however. And so every race I went there, and I didn't think about what would be the repercussions if I crash out at this stage. I just wanted to give it the best. And that mentality, that mentality of that young boy who has nothing to lose, is something that I could have, I think in hindsight, kept with me for a lot more races in my, during my career, when that fear of failure is actually the thing that is holding you back. Whereas if you go without thinking and you do what your body is trained to do, time and time again over the years before the Olympics, that's what you have to trust in, and that you have to trust in yourself, and don't be scared of failure, because you really have nothing to lose.
Yes, as I started out, Shiva, with my introduction, an amazing individual, because I think that's an amazing insight for a 15, 16-year-old to be approaching this kind of challenging environment and going, hey, I have nothing to lose. All the things that we talk to ourselves about, all I need to do is trust my training, trust my body, and allow myself to execute. And a lot of times I think, the salesperson who has this huge deal on the line and is worried about, losing it, if he or she would just focus on all the years of experience and training and study and allow themselves to execute, as opposed to focusing on the fact that they may fail, then, I think they would have very different results. So you and I, Shiva, we are both Winter Olympians. The Winter Olympics is sometimes called the White Olympics because it's the snow and the ice is white, but also most of the athletes are Caucasian. What was it? And I know that I've experienced this as well. There's a huge Olympic family, and you've described that. What was it like for you, though, in the very beginnings? How did your fellow lugers accept you, or did they accept you?
Yeah, well, that is also a very, very interesting process for me. My sport was dominated by a handful of countries, the Alpine countries, and then it got extended to, Russia, of course, and then extended to the US, Canada. But only a very small part of the world, a small part of the population of the world was represented by these athletes. And when I stepped in for the first time at an international event, I was obviously an outsider, and you could see it from a mile away. Everybody would speak the same language. I came from a completely different background. Everybody could see that I'm the odd one out over here. And that definitely made me stick out in the crowd, and I had to deal with a lot of issues because when you're the only one who's different, people don't really understand what you're about, or how you behave, or the things that you're generally used to calling normal, and that was something that caused a lot of hardship initially. But at the same time, I realized that once I proved myself on the field of play, then people started seeing me for what I am inside. And we realized that we are all doing the same thing. we all have the same spirit, and there's a lot of things that we have in common. And that's when more and more people started coming to me and befriending me. Earlier, I was the one who always had to go out and make the first move and try to learn from others. And since I was young, I was much younger to all the other competitors. A lot of them saw me as the kid that I was. So it was easy for me to break that barrier and go and ask for advice, let's say, from a competitor, because they didn't really see me as a threat.
Right.
And but it did take a long time for the athletes from the traditional countries, let's say, to accept me as part of the family, and that happened only once they saw that my commitment, to the sport and to my passion was real, and that started a whole new, very interesting process of exchange, and me able to tell everybody what makes me different, what's normal for me, and understand from them what is normal from them. So I think I grew a lot by meeting people from diverse cultures and races and religions. And I myself learned a lot, because I come from a very, very small village where I used to see the inverse. People used to come from abroad visiting our area, and we used to term them all as Angrez, which in India means Englishman, and it's the same term for any nationality, no matter what country you're from.
Yeah.
And we used to think they're all the same. And so here I was facing that in the inverse, and so I had to, kind of assert that, I'm unique, I'm my person, and this is what I stand for. And then, I started to make a connection with everybody.
And that's one of the things I absolutely love about sports, and I think that really distinguishes it from, say, the corporate world. Because I get it. I think it's human nature to look at you suspiciously if you're quote unquote different. But in sports, all we care about is performance. The thing we care about most is performance. Is this guy or this girl, can they do what they're supposed to do? And especially in sports like ours, are they going to make it safe for us? Or are they going to create an added layer of danger for us? And you're right, I experienced this as well. Once they saw that you were serious, once they saw that you were committed, then you're welcome into the brotherhood, as it were. Which I don't know that atmosphere necessarily exists in the corporate world, but certainly in sports it's there. So, dude, this has been a journey of more than 20 years, 22 years, right? And I can just imagine the peaks and valleys, right? The challenges on the track. You have described some of them, learning the nuances of the sport, getting through challenging corners, as we have to do in bobsledding as well, getting hurt, crashing, even if your body isn't hurt, getting some bruised egos all the time, but off the track as well, especially with the lack of resources where you're from, and lack of funding. How do you deal with all of those challenges, Shiva? How do you find a way to keep on pushing?
Well, that was a huge challenge for me throughout my career. I remember it was very difficult for me to even explain to my government that I've qualified for the Winter Olympics. They didn't really know what it was. They, in fact, asked me for a certificate to prove that it was the same thing as the Summer Games, and it's not some kind of invitation event. And the next thing I was told is, okay, you want us to fund you? Why don't you win a medal and show that you're worth funding? And somebody who comes from sports, that that's not the way it works. You have to invest in your youth, and you have to give them the tools to perform and to succeed. And so even there, I had to come up with innovative ways. I did that by reaching out to my competitors. And I was, of course, helped a lot by the international federation that created a group of international athletes. The International Luge Federation has this program that they coach, and they bring together a lot of countries that don't have enough funding to have a technical staff.
Yeah.
And so you pool your resources, and you learn that way. But still, when you're focused on winning, you know that you need personalized coaching. You need a coach that finds the equipment, the technique, the training that works for you. And so that was the second challenge. How can I get that kind of funding and resources to be in that space? And that is where I have my wife Namita. I met her in 2006, and it was a time that I was really asking myself, can I really compete against the best in the world without these resources, without being able to go for this amount of training, without able to invest in this kind of equipment? Mm-hmm. And she was from a corporate background, and she said, you know what, your story is so unique. Your passion, can help and inspire so many people. Why don't we take this? If the government is not supporting you right now, let's go to the corporate sector. Let's put yourself out there. And don't give up, And so we started looking for sponsorships together. And no sports management company would look at me because nobody thought that there was any potential in an unknown sport. Yeah. So we were on our own, and we didn't have any contacts. So thank God, internet was a thing already, and so through online we would get. We'd look up the main companies and get the contacts of the marketing directors, and we would write to them. And we knocked at so many doors. We knocked at over 100 doors before the first company said, you know what, I'm going to support you, and I believe in what you're doing. And that gave me confidence. And also, once you have somebody backing, then it's easier to get the second and third and fourth sponsor. And so then I got a few sponsors on board, and Coca-Cola helped me out, Swiss International Airlines helped me out, Samsung, so many companies, Reebok. They were lining up by the end of it, to come and support me. And then eventually Indian companies picked up on this as well, because all the others were international companies, and they understood that we have to support the country. And so I had Malcolm, I had other Indian companies supporting me. So I think when you believe in yourself and you're pitching yourself to somebody else, your enthusiasm catches on. Whereas in my case, when I was going out to a sports management company, they didn't really get my passion. They didn't really get what I am. They couldn't convince other people. Right. So that's how we were able to get funding to take our project or a training plan to the next level. And then once I won my first international medal, I went back to the government and said, "Hey, remember you told me that you funded me?" Right.
Yeah. But you said something that is right on point, believing in yourself, because what you're describing to me is persistence. You and your wife, finding this way to keep on pushing. But you can't persist. You can't keep on pushing if you don't believe in yourself. There's only why would you do that if you didn't think that you have the ability to get it done in the first place? And so it's kind of an interesting relationship, I think, between belief in yourself and persistence. The more you believe in yourself is the more you persist. But the more you persist is the more you believe in yourself, and you create this upward spiral that eventually leads to success one way or another. On your journey, Shiva, I'm assuming that you have had doubters. You have had people who told you, man, this is an unrealistic dream. It's harebrained. No Indian can become an international, a competitive international luger. What advice do you have for us, that for people who are pursuing their dreams but have to contend with doubters?
Well, that is something that there's no lack of people that doubted me, or that's going to doubt you, or doubt anybody who's trying to set out to do anything great in life. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, people view the world through the lens of their own experience. And when you're trying to do something great, which not many people have done before, the first reaction is going to be, this is not possible, right? Mm-hmm. For me, I turned that into, motivation for myself. Yeah. Every time somebody told me that you cannot do it, I was that much more adamant to prove them wrong. And every time I broke through, a glass ceiling for myself, I knew that I could aim for the next, the next step, the next record, get another personal best or prove the others wrong. And there were a lot of naysayers when I started. Even by the time I finished, there were a lot less of them, but there still were people. Yeah. So I think that teaches us that there's always people who are going to try to bring you down, and there might be a number of reasons for that. Maybe because they don't feel they can do it themselves, or just out of spite, or there's so many reasons. So rather than focusing on others and focusing on that negativity, I focused on myself. And, in fact, I went one step further and I used that negativity to motivate me and to be that much more adamant and, just keep going forward.
Indeed. That's wise words. So, and you just spoke about the difficulty you have had with, raising sponsorship. The Indian government or the Indian Olympic Committee wasn't very supportive as well. I read about the fact that for the 2002 Olympics, you flew into Montreal and hitchhiked to the Salt Lake City Olympic Games. We have done some crazy things in bobsledding to raise funding. That takes a cream. That takes a pride.
Yes, well, that was incredible. I mean, I remember when I got to the U.S. border. I knew I had people when I would get to the States, get to the village, the trading center, but I had absolutely no money, no credit cards, nothing on me to get me until that point. Yeah. And I would have, I thought that I would have hitched a ride with one of the other teams from the airport, but none of them were there. And so I had to hitch a ride. And when I reached the border, the immigration authorities told me that there's a $10 fee that I had to pay to get the paperwork to enter the country, and I did not have even $10 on me. Right. And so so I appealed to the officers who are on the border, and I told them what I'm going to be doing, and that I don't have any money on me right now. And one of the lady officers actually took out a $10 bill and paid for my immigration fee and allowed me to get in the country. And I will forever remember that.
So even this immigration officer became a team member, and it really reinforces the fact that none of us, no matter how unrealistic we dream and how determined we are and how persistent we are, you still need others to help you to achieve that dream. So you're having all this difficulty, Shiva, in raising funds and having the resources to train. But then in 2002, the Italians offered you all the resources that you need. Most people, I don't think know that you're actually half Italian. Your mom is Italian as well. And so obviously the Italians saw your commitment and your passion and felt that you could add value to their program. And they're going to offer you the one thing you didn't have that you'd need to excel, all the resources. And you said no. Why? Please tell us.
Well, that's another very, very, it was a difficult decision, no doubt, at some levels. But at the same time, right now I feel like I'm a citizen of the world, because of all my exposure. I feel that, anywhere in the world I go, I can make a place for myself. But my roots still remain my roots. And especially at that time, I started the sport to push for a bigger idea. I started skiing and competing along with a lot of other, young friends and, companions of mine from my village. And we had a common dream. We would see the Winter Olympics on TV, and we would say, one day this place is going to be the center of the world for winter sports, because we have everything over here. We have the mountains, we have the passion, we have the athletes. And so I always wanted to contribute to that. And I think since it was kind of a higher calling, that was also something that that kept me focused on the goal. That is not just from myself, from my own self-realization that I'm competing, but for all the people who helped me get to this point and who pushed me and who support me. And every time I go abroad, they send me messages, and they send me their energy. At that time, my thought process was simple. Right now, we have nothing in India in terms of infrastructure for the sport, but wait for 5 years, and I'm sure everything is going to be here. So the thing I told myself is that
forever the dreamer. I see.
What I told myself was I just need to stick to what I'm doing. I've qualified for the Olympics now. I'm doing better and better. I'm getting closer to the leaders. And I'm going to bring attention to my area, and we're going to have development over there, and it's going to be the center of the world. And obviously that didn't happen because these things take a lot more time, and now I'm a lot more humbled by knowing that some of these changes take generations and take lifetimes, but I still have my small part to play, and that decision also helped me to stay true to myself, to my roots, and to keep the passion, the fire of passion burning. Because it's easy to say that if I would have been in one of the top teams, getting the best equipment and best coaching, I could have done a lot better professionally as an athlete. But it wouldn't have given me all the opportunities I have today to continue to work on this nascent winter sports movement in India, hopefully build an academy, hopefully impact so many other young kids' lives, and things that I did over the years, by training juniors and still being a person in the community whose word counts for something.
So what I'm hearing is that you chose a higher purpose over personal gain, and that's commendable. So the Beijing Olympic Games are coming up in 2022. What do you see your role as? What do you envision that to be?
Well, now it's over a year since I've stopped being part of the circuit as an athlete, and there's definitely a lot of bittersweet moments every time I turn on the TV and see the others competing in the World Cup. And life has phases, and I gave my best during the 22 years that I competed for India. And even during that time, I already started to coach the younger generation of athletes. And I had taken a few kids to Asian training camps for 2 years in a row. And I think now what I can do is, as an athlete, you have to be selfish. You're thinking about yourself a lot because it's all about self-improvement. And now I think because of my journey and because of my experience, I'm in a position to impact a lot more people. And of course, my passion is still with my sport, it's still with the Olympic movement. So I want to take my experience and hope to rope in other kids and maybe train them and give them some of the things that I lacked, some of the advice that I wasn't given, and I could have, got a lot better, I got a lot more benefit from. So I think I understand where a young winter sports athlete in India is at this stage, and I think I'm in a position to mentor and to coach and to open a lot more doors and to give the right advice as to what to do, what not to do, how to concentrate, and I hope that can be my role in the future.
Right. So is that what you see your next step in sports in the Olympic movement is, developing I guess a winter sports program in your neck of the woods and putting more kids on ice?
Yeah, in fact, I'm working on an ambitious project for an Olympic training center in the Himalayas, which would focus on winter and adventure sports. And that is something that I'm really passionate about, and I'm trying to open all my contacts, people who believe in this through the reach that I have all around the world, to get people together to create the ideal environment which I hope that I would see during my career as an athlete. So that is something that I'm I'm really working towards. And at the same time, something else that in my experience was lacking in India is athletes' participation in the decision-making process. For so many years, I didn't see a single athlete who is part of a sports governing body, or who is part of the sports ministry, or people who've really been there, done that, have the experience to be able to go and administer the sport. And so I started by getting a group of Olympians together in India from various sports, and telling them, why don't we come together, make an organization, make this Olympians Association of India, and through our combined knowledge, through our combined experience, try to make lives better, not just for the future generation of athletes, but for society in general, because of our reach as Olympians. So these are the two things that I'm mainly working with right now.
That is awesome. Any before we wrap up, any parting words, about whether it's a projects you're working on or just Olympism in general?
Well, there's so much I'd like to share. If I can be a little selfish right now and ask people to support my initiative to create a training center in the Himalayas, I'm very easily accessible through Facebook, through Twitter. My handle is 100th of a sec. You can follow me, get in touch with me, and help me build this dream together. And if you're a young athlete out there trying to get into sports, also feel free to contact me. I'm very happy to share my advice and my experiences. I guess a message to all the people out there is, if you're looking at my journey, you don't have to copy what I did, but the message from my journey is, find something that drives you. Get your own unique goal, and then once you have that goal, you just keep on pushing until you reach there.
Dude, you couldn't have said it any better. It's been such an honor to catch up with you, first of all, man. Such a pleasure to catch up with you after all these years. 22 years is we're getting up there, Shiva. But an honor to be able to kind of learn more about your story and your philosophy. There's much to unpack here, much that myself and our viewers or our listeners can apply to their lives. It doesn't matter how unrealistic the dream is, how limited your circumstances and the resources are, and the people that you look to for inspiration. In the end, you have to carve your own path, and I think your life is a clear demonstration of that, Shiva. You embody the keep on pushing philosophy. So thanks again for joining us, gracing us with your presence and sharing your knowledge, your pearls of wisdom. And, want to wish you all the luck in your, I love it, the ambitious plans that you have. So yes, keep on pushing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Devon, and keep on inspiring everybody the way you inspired me as well.
All right.
It was a pleasure talking to you. Hope to see you soon.